Well, this is the first episode. Dr. Jeff Springer from Suit Up Ministries, Dad University, and Mike Fineman from the Dad Link. And we were introduced. How were we introduced, bro?
I think it was was it Coach Johnson?
Yeah, Coach Johnson. That's right. I met him through LinkedIn somehow and connected him with C Suite for Christ. And then he connected us, and we just hit it off because we're in the same kind of headspace and have some of the same callings, right? And to help dads become the best dads they can be. And for me, I've always been very passionate about the fatherless. And we talked about that at great length and really hit it off. That's why we just decided, hey, let's record together. But with the fatherless comes fathers that don't know how to be fathers. So if they weren't taught by their father how to be one, they don't know how to be one. And, they're just kind of, as they say, winging it, right? We're doing the best we can. And I was that guy. I had a great dad in my life, but he just didn't pour into me, and I wasn't in the home. I was in boarding schools for many years. So I had to learn how to be a dad, and my faith brought me there. And it just became my calling to help other dads find that path.
Yeah, I was blessed, Michael, to have a dad. Um, and he really did. I tell people I love it that he lived long enough to not only show me how to be a dad, he also showed me how to be a grandpa. So, I'm just a few years older than you.
Yeah.
I'm on, I'm in that next life stage, but um, it helps. It really does help that you have someone that has kind of showed you the way, kind of showed you the path, so to speak. But
Yeah.
my heart has been because I had such a good dad, and because I was in education for all these years and a coach. I saw firsthand what I had in comparison to what a lot of my students and athletes didn't have,
Right.
and the ill effects of an absent father. So, and I did get somewhat of a taste of it because my parents were divorced, and fortunately, when my parents got divorced, my dad didn't divorce me or my sister, but we would go, weeks sometimes not seeing my dad. It was we went from all of us being under one roof to not being under one roof. And so that gave me really a glimpse, Michael, of what it's like to have, a family without a father.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you experienced it. And same, I had my dad at home, but then I was in boarding school, so I wasn't with my dad. And because I wasn't with my dad, I was raised by all these other people. I had all these people in my life that, were staff members at these boarding schools. So I had all this influence from all these different people. But then when it was time for me to come back into the home, I completely rejected my dad. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that, and I ended up out on my own pretty much at 15 years old out in the world and made a go of it. And the funny thing is, I don't even know how I survived because I did not understand love really, and that was based on my upbringing. I didn't understand relationships. I was terrible at them. I had great friends, and I maintained that really well. But when it came to dating, I was short term with everything. I had mom issues. I had years of things that I had to work through. Yet I was trying to make a living and build a life and do something powerful with my life. And to be honest with you, looking back, I'm in my second 50 years of life now. And man, like, I lost a lot of time, but I learned a lot on the way. I don't think God wastes anything. I think that time was training time and learning time. And I gained this amazing sense of insight about myself, which helped me understand other people better, and you've gone deeper in that in pastoring and some of the things that you've done, and in teaching too. And what was the subject matter that you were teaching? I mean, it was along this line, right?
Yeah. I mean, the fact that, yeah, I was in secondary. I was a junior high coach. taught, I mean, I was an old phys ed teacher
Yeah.
and health and driver's ed. And, when we moved up to the high school, of course. But, what I love about this conversation, Michael, is that we're learning about each other
Yeah.
because as you mentioned, we really we've been connected by a third party, which is typically how it happens. But you and I have never met,
Not in person.
not in
No.
person.
Yeah.
Um, but we have this again. We have people in our lives that cross our path that are great connectors, and Coach Johnson is
Yeah.
a great connector, and so how we got on this similar path, the same lane, so to speak, is interesting. So, no, so tell me about your. I don't know even about your own kids. Tell me about your.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell
Yeah.
me
I
about
was
your.
just gonna say maybe we should just give a little bit of a bio about ourselves,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
um, so as I said, I was on my own at 15, had kind of a rough childhood, rough coming up. I ended up going through just a string of relationships when I was younger and kind of relived my childhood when I was older and had a few dollars. And so I got married right at about the age of 30. And I married my son's mom, and she had three kids. So I married into three kids. I had said I don't want any kids because I was afraid I was going to screw them up because I felt like my parents did and made so many mistakes. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. And I really didn't even want kids. And it's funny, in the first conversation really I had with her, she said, I asked her to dinner and she said, you just said you don't like kids. And I said, yeah, but I haven't really told you why. So we ended up, and I was a bit of a player back then, and so for me, I was like, well, let's just see where this goes. I ended up falling in love with her and the kids, and I just bought a house and I was redoing the house, and it was a 3 bedroom, 2 bath with a pool. And I'm like, yeah, this kind of all fits. Maybe they need they have a small house. Maybe this would be great for them. And so we raised those three. We had one in the middle, a biological son, who's now almost 18. He'll be 18 in January. But the marriage lasted about 12 years, and it's been over we got divorced in 2013. So I've remained pretty much a single dad. I have dated a few women I would say courted over the years, but haven't ended up married. And uh, have really been working hard. I was in corporate for many years and sold heavy construction equipment. I met with a lot of dads, and kind of what led me into this. I met so many fathers, and I always want to talk about things of the heart, man. I want to talk about things that matter, real things. I don't care about the weather. I'm not interested in that conversation. I want to go deep, and I did. I would go deep with these guys all the time, and
Mhm.
just hear, what their life was like, and
Right.
talk about things that matter. So I ended up finding out there was a huge gap, not just with myself in not knowing how to be a dad, because I found myself as a single dad with a 5-year old, realized I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know how to raise a kid. I don't really know how to keep a house. I don't know how to cook. I don't know how to do anything. And here I am. I want to be the best dad I can be. And so ended up really how I got into this, Jeff, is I looked at my son one day. Yeah, actually, we had a life interrupt, and I had to pull him out of school because he was being bullied so bad. He literally had a breakdown because he wasn't telling on the kids. We knew he was being bullied, but he wasn't telling us to what extreme, and it was really bad. And we ended up having to pull him out of school. So here I have this big boy job. I'm working 12 hours a day, and I find myself home. So I had to figure out what to do. He was out of school, and I was journaling, and the Lord told me to quit my job and be a dad. And I
Mm.
was really afraid of that, but I did it. I figured, okay, this will last 6 months, 4 years. But in that process, I was looking at my son, and I started journaling one day. Who do I want my son to become? And it took 3, 4 days. I just kept journaling, kept all these things, all these attributes that I wanted him to have. And I was praying about it. And I'm like, all right, Lord, this is the man I want him to become. How do I help him become that man? And
Wow.
he very clearly told me that I first had to become that man. And I
Mhm.
realized whatever I do, he's going to do. Jesus said, whatever, I only do what I see the Father do. I only say what I hear the Father say. There's a pattern there that I learned from. And I realized that more is caught than taught, especially with boys. So I had to become that man. I had to walk everything out that I wanted for him. It's been, 12, 12 years now. I've been single dad. I've been walking it pure. I'm not, I'm courting, but I'm not sleeping with these women because I want my son to save himself from marriage, right? And
Mhm.
how else do I get him to do that if I'm not doing it?
Right.
He's not gonna do it if I don't do it. And it's
Mhm.
difficult. It's upstream and it's against the grain. And it's all of that. But I tend to court women that are on the same page, so it makes it a little bit easier. And so
Mhm.
that's how I got to this place, man. I just, over the years, raised him in the way that became the man I needed to become, raised him in the way that I thought was right. And the fruit that I see from him now is what really gave me the guts to get out and do this. Because my son is just, we all brag about our kids, but he's just an amazing young man. He's a standout kind of kid. And I get that reaction from people that don't know him all the time. And so I've gotten that justification or that validation. And I realize I really need to get this voice out there because there's all these voices talking to our kids that are horrible stuff, man. Like, the Andrew Tates of the world. And yeah, great, he's a cool guy, but the message he's sharing with the kids is horrible, and it's teaching them to try to get rich quick and do something fast and buy his products. And the truth is, you know, I don't want my son to becoming anything like that, and
Yeah.
so I have to speak against it. And I believe guys like us need to speak into the world.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Well, well, I mean, obviously it sounds like, you're beginning to reap, what you've been sowing with
yeah,
you and if you as the point that you made that sometimes begins with me, it's if it's going to be, it starts with me, that man in the mirror, all these
yeah,
cliches, but they're all
yeah.
real.
They're all true.
It's all the truth.
Yeah.
We don't really like to hear that, but do as I say, not as I do is what we
Yeah.
typically is typically the world. Um, but
I mean,
anyway,
you in education, you've watched your kids for how long you been in education?
I was in education 34 years.
Okay. So
And then I've repurposed in 2016. I'm still in education. I'm just in higher ed. My
yeah.
students have just
Yeah.
gotten older. So 44 years. This is my 44th year. And then, and I see kids from pre-K now because I supervise student teachers, and some of my student teachers are pre-K teachers all the way up to high school. And then my actual students, who are the student teachers, are young adults becoming teachers. And then I also coach, adults that are assistant principals.
Yeah.
So we're kids at all ages, at all life stages. But anyway, so that, what was that? What was the realization? I mean, what was that crossing point? What was that point that you said, "Hey, I got to be, if I want my son to be who I want him to be, I've got to be that guy." I
Yeah.
mean, what was that? What was that point in your life? Or
I mean, it was during the time when I was home with him,
okay,
taking care of him. God was taking care of us.
okay,
I mean,
okay,
I had enough money to maybe go a year and a half, but I don't even know how we made it after that. We just did. And never really went without too much. And my son never knew really that we had money problems. He had no idea because I made going to the beach, a whole event, and that didn't cost me anything but the gas to get there and a couple sandwiches. So
yeah,
I just learned how to make the best of what we had. But that was the
mhm,
moment. And that's when I rediscovered myself too, because I'd lost myself in the marriage, which I think a lot of people do. And you kind of give yourself up a little bit at a time. And I had no idea who I was anymore either. That was it. But I want to hear your story, but I also want to get back to that education point after, because I'm thinking about something on that. But
yeah.
I'd love to hear your background.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I still don't. And honestly, I don't want to grow up.
Right. I'm right there with you.
I'm like Peter Pan, So, but
The Toys R Us kid.
yeah. So I played. Yeah. So I played. I played sports in high school. Played football. Loved football, and I went off to school at Abilene Christian University and played football there. And I was a sociology major. And the good news is I took some upper level classes before I was supposed to, and I
Yep.
decided that wasn't. Even though I love sociology, I didn't see myself. I felt like if I'm going to do social work, I might as well, I might as well do something that I really love, and
Right.
that's teaching, which is ministry and social work.
Yeah.
And so I became a teacher and a coach in the state of Texas, and did that, like I said, for 34 years. I was a teacher and a coach for 13 and 20, and then there was one year that I was an overlap there with assistant principal and head coach. Um, and then 21 years in administration, the last 14 years as a principal at a high school of over 2,000 students, and um, loved every minute of it. At the same time, I was also on staff at a church, and as the minister of men, and so all of these things kind of weave. I've been married for it'll be 44 years in June, this
That's
next
awesome.
June. Yeah. I'm not going to tell you it's always been a bed of roses. Being married, as you know, it's a full-time job.
It's a lot of work.
And
Yeah.
it's work. Yeah. There was a point early in our marriage that we were separated, and this is BC, before children, and but it worked out and made us stronger, and I definitely feel like that's something that we maybe had to go through to make our life together better, and so forth. But anyway, two kids, 35, 36, one daughter, one son, and my son is single and is an architect, and my daughter is married. It was a teacher for a decade, and now gave me my three grands and two granddaughters, and a grandson, and they live very close. All of them are in the Houston area. I live in the Houston area.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I not only get to be, I tell dads everywhere. I said, if the great thing about being a grandpa is if you uh, it's a second chance. And I always joke with my kids. I said this, thank you for giving me a second opportunity to be a better grandpa, be a better man. And my daughter always says, "Dad, you were a great dad." But
Yeah.
but regardless of how hard one of the messages I want to share with young dads in particular, no matter how hard you try, you're going to make mistakes.
Oh, yeah. A
And
lot of them.
yes, and there's going to be times where could have been done better, and wished you had done better. But the beautiful thing about being a dad is that once a dad, always a dad, and you could start today. So one of the
Yeah.
messages as we talk these next, through this podcast, one of the messages I hope that any listener hears is from both of us is that it's not easy being a dad. Dads need each other. And to encourage and sometimes commiserate and or whatever, and support. But it's never too late to be a dad. You can, in wherever you've been,
Yep.
whatever you've done, you can start today. You can't change the past, but you can change the future.
Yep.
And and today, as long as today is today.
Yeah. As
And
long as you're both alive, you're still the father,
that's
and you
right.
could lots of things can be fixed later.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So,
yeah, and going back to the mistake thing, I think the one thing I learned with my son early on was that transparency was key. I didn't share things that were above his understanding, but if I made a mistake, I apologized. And I would apologize. I would tell him why I think I made a mistake and how I think I'm going to do better. And that taught him to do the same. So without having to tell him this is how you do it, when he makes a mistake, he owns up to it. That's the first thing I want him to do. That's part of being a man is to, admit your failures. But then the second thing is instead of dwelling on it, how are we going to do better? What are you going to do different? I don't have to ask him that. He actually will tell me, man, I am so sorry. You caught me at a bad time. I barked at you. I shouldn't have done that. That was disrespectful. I'm going to breathe for a second next time. I'm not going to respond immediately. I'm going to take a second. And I was like, wow, like at 17, he said that. I was
yeah.
floored. It was an amazing response, you
Yeah.
know? And my job, like yours was, and now you're enjoying that, is to set them up to be great spouses and great parents.
Yeah.
And you want your generational, legacy to go on. And if you don't give them the tools they need, they're never going to get there. And I want my ceiling to be his floor. I want him
Yeah.
to start where I stop.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what you were talking about, what you're talking about right there is bestowing, and that's really what got me into God laid on my heart, because to see this gap, this absence in the hearts of students that were coming into my buildings that didn't have that, what you just described. So
Right.
many times, as you know, there is there's the root of the problem. It's not necessarily what we see. We see the outcome, the outcry, the behavior.
Yeah.
And so as a school administrator, I dealt with a lot of kids that you would, once you peeled back layers, you found out that the reason why they were acting out is
Yeah.
because they didn't have this bestowal of
Didn't have the tools to communicate what
who
they were
tried.
feeling.
Yeah, they something went wrong in their life. Nobody taught them how to overcome, how to have
Right.
resilience, how to persevere. Nobody there was no conversation of life lesson, you
Yeah.
know, and how do we navigate? There's no get, and
That's the
so
father's role.
yeah, and
You know,
so how do we, so there we go, and so we have generations after generations where um, somewhere along the line the cycle has to be broken,
yeah.
or
Have you
else.
even as an infant, if they can't tell you what's wrong, so they scream. But you ever notice before you're a father, I noticed this on an airplane. You hear a baby screaming, I'm like, oh God, always I sit by the screaming baby. And then I have a child and I can determine pretty much what that child needs. Oh, he's scared. Oh, he's hungry. Oh, that one, is freaked out right now. Whatever it is, you start to hear it, but at all ages, and unfortunately, even to adulthood, with some people that never get this training, they act out because they can't communicate their feelings. So they act them out, and their behavior shows one thing, like you said. But you have to look past that, especially as a parent, because you can get so ticked off at the disrespect. It's not disrespect. It's usually fear when they're disrespectful, or some sort of, internal struggle that they're not able to communicate. And instead of getting ticked off, it's an opportunity to break them down and go, okay, what are we doing? And with boys, that's a labor does that a lot. I'm big on hard labor with boys. I don't mean, slave labor. I mean, hey, let's go move these pavers from one side of the driveway to the other.
Yeah,
I'm going to show you what to do. I'm going to go in the house. You do it. When you're done, I'm going to come talk to you. Because when they're exhausted, you can
yeah,
talk. Or if you're doing a project side by side, if you're working on something side by side, they'll open up and they'll start to talk. But man, we have to recognize that. That's
yeah,
hard.
yeah. And the key there in all of that of what you just said is being present in
And
time.
intentional. And intentional.
In time, you can't.
Yeah.
None of that happens unless you're there, unless
That's right.
right, unless you're intentional. And so even even if you're present doesn't necessarily mean you're participating. Just
Correct.
so you're right. The intentionality moves past just being in the room.
Yeah.
And how many times? I mean, because we can be in the room and still checked out. I
Absolutely.
mean, there's fathers that are under the same roof, but may as well not be. You
Yeah.
know, and
This is the problem. This
true.
is a problem. It's
Yeah,
changing everything for the dads too.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely. So, you asked about my background. So in 2008, God really planted in my heart this idea of Suit Up Ministries, and the idea, it's really a combination of my athletic background and my
Yeah.
ministry background. Two things I love: you suit up, get in the game, put on
Yeah.
literally physically put on your armor. And foundational scripture for Suit Up Ministries is Romans 13:12. That the night is nearly over. The dawn is nearly here. So put away the deeds of darkness and put on the armor of light to suit up. So that's where the nonprofit suitupministries.org came about. But the byproduct of that, or what we do, is called the Dad University. And so that's that's kind of a mini version of the evolution to, okay, so now what? Now I have a nonprofit,
Yeah.
and then your version, the dad link, and which I think is really cool, that we can, again, lock arms
Yeah.
in this race to grow to raise the next generation of dads.
Yeah. And we have such a similar mindset on this too. And, from coming from a biblical aspect, which is cool. My original program before this was called Identity University, and it had almost a similar logo to yours. And I laughed when I saw it because I'm like, yeah, that's what I used to do too. I was doing that. I was launching it, I was building it, and I was working with young people that didn't have a dad. And I have a real passion for them too. And I was praying through it one day, and I was about to make a big financial move to really get it moving. And the Lord corrected me and asked me, who creates the identity? Well, of course you do, Father. I'm journaling all this. He says, yeah, but in the home. I said, well, the father. And he goes, yeah, the father gives your child the last name. He gives them their identity. He gives them their direction. He gives them their career sometimes. They'll just follow, or he'll, be in the same business, whatever. He gives them all the tools they need. And, you know, but what if he doesn't? But what if he doesn't? And if he's in that room and you're coaching his son and he's not having to do it, how are you helping legacy wise? What are you doing? You're helping one child. You help that father, you'll help generations to come. And that's what shifted gears. I honestly didn't want to go into this. It's a lot easier to talk to kids than it is adults, especially with men. I call it the T factor. You got to deal with the testosterone. A lot of guys don't want to talk about this stuff, and I get it. Like, we're taught to be strong and carry the load, and we still do that. I mean, you and I would do it all the time. But there is some freedom in talking with a brother that you can be open with and even complain to, that'll hear you out, that'll
Right.
help you through this stuff. And instead of trying to figure it out on your own, driving from home from work or to work every day, you've got somebody to talk to who has another idea and bounce it off another brother,
Yep.
you know?
Absolutely.
So in
Yeah.
all those years of teaching, how did the kids change over 34 years? What did you see? What are the big things that you saw in the way kids changed?
You know, I have never been the sky is falling guy. I've never been the guy that says the good old days.
Yeah.
I believe the good old days is right now.
Yeah.
I do. Even I also think it has a lot to do with what we do with our days,
Yeah.
and how it changes our perspective on that,
Yeah. How we show up.
and yeah, and, what our preparation is, and who we know, and and who do we know, who we are acknowledging, and those kind of things. Um, it's funny. Kids are kids, no matter where you go. You can change the name of the school. You can change some of the circumstances, but some of the very same opportunities kids face. Um, no matter what the geographics are or the demographics, there's a lot. Kids all need really basically the same thing.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's what we're, again, and um, to feel, in particular, boys need to feel worthy, and that they have what it takes, and that they're good enough.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
girls need to know that they are valuable, that they are, precious, that they are cherished, you know,
Yeah.
um, and I don't think those are pretty universal, that are time tested. You know,
Yeah.
the, now I think so. I don't think kids have changed as much it's the stimulus, it's the out,
Distraction.
it's the, it's their environments that have
Yeah.
changed,
Yeah. I agree.
so, kids are kids are kids are kids, but the dynamics have changed, and then obviously we see reactions from kids that we would have maybe never seen before because they've never had to deal with these kind of maybe things.
The amount of information that comes out of him in a
Oh,
day is what used to come out of him in a month.
I think, Michael, that is probably the single biggest, um, ha, used used to be maybe in corporate world, the biggest issue that they have would be how do when the influx of the internet and all this was coming is how do they move so much information that how much more information has to be communicated and moved and how
Right.
quickly things change on a regular basis like every 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or every, news
You
cycle,
have immediate data, which you never
every,
had.
you know, um, but, so, but now but with our kids, it's almost like, how do you moderate that?
Yeah.
How do you minimize the information?
You
How do
see
you,
the story out of Australia where they're banning social media for kids under 16, the government is?
wow.
Yeah, it's just coming around right now. Now, people are saying, well, the government shouldn't have to get involved. Yeah, but if the parents aren't doing it, somebody needs to do it. And they're going to have a nation of kids who know how to communicate on this next generation. And if we don't do something similar, we're not. The biggest problem is comparison. That's
Yeah,
the biggest problem with social media is they compare themselves to these kids who are faking it. And, I was in production for a while. I know when it's staged and everything's staged. There's hardly anything that's real anymore. We talked about that's why we need to do this. And
yeah,
not, we'll polish it as we go, but we don't need to be all polished. We need to just get it out there and start talking about it.
right.
Um, and that's
Yeah.
huge. I want to go back to something you said though. I talk about the father's approval a lot. And when a boy does not get his father's approval, he will continue to strive to get it from the world.
Mhm.
And what he's not taught to do is harness his power. And we call that, or some people call that, toxic masculinity. That is just a boy with power that has become a man who hasn't become a man. He's looks like a man, but he's still a boy trying to understand why his father didn't approve of him. Most of those guys, most of the big, tough, burly, tattooed, not all of them, but a lot of those guys are super insecure when you get to know them. Even some of the best looking guys, man, I've met some guys that just look like models and they really are super insecure about the way they look. And a lot of that has to do with comparison and what social media has done for that, and but the father's approval not given to a girl can be more harmful because she's going to go find love from a guy
Right.
generally and seek the approval of men, and that can go, in many unhealthy ways. But that the father's approval is so important. And I'm a guy like, I've made all kinds of amends with my dad, and I love my dad, and we've been through a lot together. Um, but really, his mindset is, get a job, work 30, 40 years, get your watch, and retire. I'm not that kind of guy. I'm an entrepreneur. I do all kinds of stuff that scares him, and he still doesn't approve of that thing. I'll tell him, hey, I'm going to this speaking event, and the question will be, well, is that your real job or is that one of these other things? Not even knowing that, I'm getting paid to be the keynote and it's
Right.
pretty lucrative. It would be more than me being in an office. But he doesn't understand it and therefore doesn't approve of it. And the lack of approval has created a lot of things in my life where I had to find a way to change that filter, accept God as my father and let him give me the approval because he does approve of what I do and who I am. He made me this way. But
Yeah.
man, working through that, I probably lost 20 years of my life seeking for approval. And I
Mm,
wouldn't say I lost it again. They were all good lessons, but I would be in a different place with my father's approval at a young age. I would have gone way higher than I went, I think.
yeah. Yeah. There's, you know, I mean, obviously, there are women and men that somehow survive through that circumstances that you just described, that
Right.
deficiency. But that doesn't diminish the fact that you would have been even it would have been maybe an easier route or
Absolutely
a
easier.
different
Yeah.
route with
Yeah.
the blessing of the Father. And I would say that I would venture to say that someone else, Michael, filled that. I mean, obviously your heavenly Father. You've mentioned that several
Yes.
times. That's number one. But but I typically to me what I find out is the difference maker is if it's not the biological dad, it is some male figure in your life. And
Yeah. And there were a few. You're right.
I'm going to venture to say there was, whether it was indirect or direct, intentional or non-intentional,
Yeah.
you had some other males in your life. Maybe,
Yep. Friends, dads that poured into me, that taught me things. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think I tell dads all the time, if you're a dad and you know you're a good dad and you're intentional, then you need to be a father in your entire realm of influence because most of the kids around you don't have that.
yeah,
And I hate to say most, but we're in America. I can say most.
it's true. It's so true.
Statistically, that's true.
Yeah.
25% of black children have both parents in the home.
Mm.
And it's not just
Well,
by race, it's not just by
but
culture. Overall, it's, I think, 68% right now fatherless homes. And that could mean that they're divorced and they have, they're back and forth in
right,
single parent
right.
home too. But um, and so we have opportunities as men to father all kinds of people around us, all kinds of kids up to 20, 30 years old, and mentor them and father them in a way that is unobtrusive but very loving and very intentional. Again, if I see a kid that's going sideways, that's always acting out, something's going on.
With
He's not just a bad kid. There are no bad kids.
right,
There's no
right,
such thing.
right, right. It is. I heard a quote. I can't remember who told me this quote. It attributed to the Quakers about our enemy is a story about a person we don't know yet. Y-
Ooh,
That there was someone's story that we don't know yet. So in other words, so we have a
wow.
lot of assumptions in
Yeah.
about behaviors,
Yeah.
outward behaviors. And, wow, what's wrong with that kid or what's wrong with that person, and we make a lot of judgments,
Yeah.
without asking a lot of questions and a lot of assumptions. But a lot of that is so prevalent is, again, they're just outcries
Yeah. That's all it is. You're right.
and you know I get really, in this ministry that we do, I like to refer to it as a movement. Creating this dad, how do we create this dad movement? That because and nobody really, for whatever reason, I don't know if you found this issue, but it seems not to be it's not a politically correct conversation to have for whatever reason sometimes. If you want to put a dent in poverty, then because kids that grow up in a single family home are 20 times greater a chance that they're going to grow up in poverty. So if you want to deal with the poverty issue, deal with the family structure, the
Right.
family. You should emphasize, the importance of not only the role of the dad, but the family. And so I mean, we've got 90% of our homeless and
Yeah.
runaways are from fatherless homes. So
Yes. And
and what happens when we have kids that are runaways? Trafficking. You know,
yeah,
and it's and it just again and then perpetuates crime.
all the way
Perpetuates.
down. Yeah, it's imprisonment, incarceration, it's teenage pregnancy, it's drug overdose, it's dropping out of school, it's being below the poverty line at work. All of those things are attributed to the father not being in the home. The enemy's been attacking that for a long time, quietly, and we've let it go by for too long, and we can't let it go by anymore. This is something that, like you said, has to be a movement. You know, I think make America great again is awesome. Make America healthy again is awesome. But, bringing the family back to the home is so tragically important.
I,
It's imperative that we do it.
I would be so, I would probably literally fall out of my chair that if I ever heard someone who has, the microphone, that makes their foundational platform on the role of the importance of the nucleus of the family and the role of the father. And,
And that's what we're doing.
I say that, when we do a lot of work in Africa, we're in Uganda and Kenya, and we talk about, we tell the men if they want a strong country, then it, their country is a reflection of their communities,
That's right.
and their communities are a reflection of their churches, and their churches are a reflection of their families, and their families are a reflection of the dad. So if you want a
Yeah.
strong country, you need
Yeah.
strong dads.
Yeah.
Ultimately, and who knows that? The enemy. The
Yeah.
enemy knows that if
Yeah.
he distracts all the men in this country, then there's going to be continued destruction and dysfunction
Yep.
and disloyalty. I mean, you name it.
Yeah. That's true.
That permeates through our society.
Yeah.
It's
And
chaos.
it is chaos. And what's happening is now, I went through this weekend event called Warriors and Queens that my friends Dave and Yvette Yaloa have, and it's phenomenal course. And then it's a year-long training, but it talks about relationships. And one of the things that they talked about heavily was, um, how men become emasculated and how that happens. And that, women have been in their masculine because the men are not doing what they have to or are supposed to do. And because the men are not doing what they're supposed to do, the women push harder and they emasculate them. They don't give them any space to actually be real about their feelings because, they need them to be a rock all of the time, which is impossible. And um, it's this perpetuating thing that is creating the divorce rate through the roof in America. But then, these guys come out, they're on their own, they go onto a dating site, which I've been on the dating sites, I understand this. It becomes way too easy to just flip to the next one, flip to the next one. And it's all by design. This is all by design. Young men are not getting married anymore because their access to pornography is so great, and women are not valuing themselves and keeping themselves for marriage. And so they're giving it away for free. And these guys don't need to get married and they're not doing it. They don't have to, they're not gonna do it. Men are wired a certain way. And if you give them free access and there's no commitment involved, most of us are going to take that route. And there are men that get taught by the Lord to do otherwise. And I praise God, I'm one of them. But man, most
Yeah.
men are just not that way, and that's okay. That's how they're wired. But it is just this big cyclical thing that's going on that we just need to speak out against it. I think so much power is in the word, spoken word, and the more people that hear this, the more blessed I'm going to feel because I really want men to get a hold of this. And even if they don't believe in what I'm saying or they don't like me, I don't care. But if they check themselves and evaluate their life they're living, then I've done what I need to do because I know they're going to see the inadequacies and they're not like, oh, woe is me, I suck at this. It's how can I improve?
Mm. Well, Michael, what would as we, again, as we begin this kind of organic podcast of
Yeah.
equipping dads together as this Dad Link and the Dad University partnership in this endeavor, what would you, as we progress through, through future sessions together, what would be some of the outcomes that you would hope that would come from this?
Yeah. I would love for dads to engage to understand their role, really understand what it means. What does it mean to be a spiritual leader in your home? What does it mean to be an intentional father? What does it mean to be a man of character? What does alpha male mean? What does beta male mean? All this stuff our kids are talking about. We need to know because they're creating a story, like you said, and an understanding in their heads from their friends. You know, one of the things I ask dads all the time is are your children coming to you with big problems? No, they're good. No, they're not good. As they become teenagers, they have problems. And if they're not talking to you, they're talking to their friends, which is the blind leading the blind, and they need you, and you've got to get in there somehow. And the one thing I want dads to know is, we said this earlier, it's never too late. I don't care
Mhm.
how bad you think you screwed up, it can be fixed. I've watched kids who were sexually abused by their father come back into relationship with their father. I've seen it. I've been a part of it. Do we have to monitor some of that? Probably. Yeah. To make sure the father doesn't fall into that again. But the kids want to love their dad. We all know anybody. I've been in uh, a marriage where my ex-wife was divorced when I married her. You know, there was this stigmatism between me and their father that was really, really tough to deal with. And, but there were all kinds of telling signs in there where there was opportunities to make an impact, and no matter what their dad did or no matter what their mom said their dad did, because I don't know what was true and what wasn't, they still loved their dad.
Mhm.
Kids are wired to love and trust and honor their dad. It's just not too late. You can always fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is, maybe talking about, um, healing yourself,
Yeah.
because a lot of dads are perpetuating the cycle because, they, like you said, they think maybe like their own dad, they've gone too far.
Right.
So they just tell themselves, I'm just repeating this same cycle my dad, but
Yeah.
but they can be the cycle breaker.
Yeah.
uh,
And
it-
a lot of them give up way too
yeah,
soon.
right.
And yeah, don't let that be, somebody else's opinion of you does not have to be yours, right? I firmly believe that. Les Brown says that all the time. And I love that. I just think that, you know, dads need to know that sometimes you need a filter change. And what I mean by that is what you have experienced from a father does not mean that's what a father is. And being able to receive God as your father for me was really hard when I was told all these things about what an amazing father he was. Now I was like, nah, I know what dads are. I know all about dads. They're not like that. And I had to change my filter to be able to even receive him as that perfect father because I didn't think that existed. And I don't think it exists with man, but I think we can get much better if we're intentional about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I just want to talk about, I want to convey, so what does it look like? What is it, to be, we use the acronym DAD is daily active devotion. So
Yeah.
what does it mean? What's it mean to be daily? What does that look like? And what's that look like to each, it'd be interesting to have a group of men on this podcast. What daily, Michael, what does that mean? Does that mean, to you as the dad, what as being, as far as the aspect of being a dad, what is daily? How does that fit into the role in the relationship that you either have or one that you desire? What's that look like? And then active,
Yeah.
again, participatory, not sitting on the sidelines, going back to my suit up, get off the bench, get in the game, to be active,
Yeah.
participant, and then devoted, so again, um, you mentioned dads that are divorced. You being a divorced dad, you're a perfect example that you are divorced, but you didn't divorce your kids.
That's right.
You still remain devoted. Matter of fact, you may have become even more, more so. And we don't know the circumstances when a husband and wife get married, but I think sometimes, I mean, divorced from a marriage and there's children involved. We don't know,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, I hear scenarios where it's not, where it's very difficult, or at least it's communicated by the father that it's very difficult to see their children because of the relationship they have with the ex. But the idea of being divorced and but devoted is really, to me, is a something that we really need to communicate, um, for all of those men out there that are still trying to figure out how to be the dad, the daily active devoted dad, but they're not
Yeah.
under the same, under the same roof, you know.
Yeah.
So how do I still be active in my kids' lives when I'm not physically there every day?
Yeah. And
For
I
them.
hope that's something we can cover quite a bit so that we can
Yeah,
help some dads with that because I've had to learn how to do that. And it's not easy, but some of the greatest things that I've stepped into happened through the hardship of that. And it's, for instance, I used to drop them off on Sunday nights. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do.
Mhm.
I just did not want to drop them off. I would drop them off Sunday night. I would take my guitar. I would go down to the beach and I would just s- play worship and sing. And it was me being hurt. I was just hurting. I was going to my dad.
Mhm.
In that, somehow turned into this big beach thing ministry with all these people that would come down with guitars and drums, and we would all worship on the beach. And it was amazing to me because I remember in the beginning, people would come up and talk to me, and oh, can I listen? Or yeah, whatever. And I complained one night. I was like, Lord, I don't feel like I'm ministering to these people. I'm not giving them anything. I'm just here for me with you. He said, well, what do you tell them when they ask what you're doing? And I always said the same thing. I'd say, I'm just singing to my dad. And he said, that's ministry. And so I said, well, it'd be nice to have a little help, maybe somebody, hanging around to bring them in or something. And the next thing I knew, about 6 months later, there was like 40 people on the beach with me. And I remember looking around and I was watching this person walk by and somebody pulled them in, started praying with them. And it hit me immediately. And I was so thankful. And he said, you asked for this. Well, an intentional, active father is thinking about the things that their kids have asked for and figuring out a way to get it to them that is healthy, right? If my kid asks for a million video games, that's not a healthy thing for me to do. I'm not going to buy him all the video games. But it is an opportunity for me to teach him how to mow lawns to buy one, right?
Sure.
Uh, and that's that devotional part because I'm thinking about those things when he's not with me.
Right.
I'm making plans for him when he's not here. I'm still praying about his wife. I'm still praying about his life as a father. I'm still thinking about the things that I need to make sure I tell him before he gets to that point. And I told him this more than once. He knows it well. And I said, I'll be with you for the rest of my life, but I will not be with you for the rest of yours. So I need
Mhm.
to know that when I go, your access to the Father is exactly the same as mine. And I won't be worried about you. I'll be dancing in the throne room because I know that you'll be good and I know God's got you. But as a man, I just need to know that I put those things in you so that you can access him and you know what to do when you get in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting you said, you and I have something in common, of course, but I was on the other end of that Sunday night. My dad used to drop us off on Sunday night.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, I'm 65, and to this day, Michael, on Sunday nights, I sometimes get kind of a
Mm.
bit in my stomach because, and a lot of men start feeling that way because they're getting ready for the work week, and they've unwinded over the weekend, and then they start, Sunday they start thinking,
Dreading Monday. Yeah.
yeah. Well, that mine was just this feeling of remembering what it was like when my dad would bring us home every other weekend. And back then, there was no texting, there was no cell phones, and so when you didn't see your dad for 2 weeks, you didn't see your dad for two
Right.
weeks. And
Right.
the only way you got to talk to him is if you just by chance got him on a landline, and or called him at work. And so
Yeah.
there was virtually no communication for those 2 weeks either.
That's
So
hard. That's
so
different.
so again, uh, I think that's what gave me that empathy, that compassion for kids that don't have a father, period. Because
Yeah.
I still knew that I had it. You know what was funny about that situation Michael, was that sometimes I wasn't sad for me, I was sad for my dad
Right.
because he would go back to his this one bedroom apartment with no furniture, you know,
Yeah.
because, we lived in the house, you know, um, and so it's funny and so I think about what kids think in those scenarios. If I, as a seventh grader, was thinking and concerned about my own parent, you think about
Right.
kids are going through and what they struggle with and what they're internalizing and what they're dealing with themselves, um, in a broken family, in a broken home. That's not where they don't have a father that's still in their life. Where a father a lot of times used that excuse of divorce to start his new life, and leave his family, completely behind.
Yeah.
And I've also heard, where the dad has great intentions after a divorce, but he bumps his head a few times, with fighting, the fight with the ex about, getting, rights to the children. So if
Yeah.
it doesn't work out, and then they just, instead of being resilient themselves, a lot of times they just, you know,
Though I get that. There were many times that I almost gave up. Many times. I mean, hundreds of times I almost gave up. And it was because my son's mom was really mad. She was vicious about it and always driving a wedge between he and I and denying it like I was crazy. But I knew the stuff my son was being told. I could tell by his demeanor. And I had to not only train him up in the way he should go, I had to untrain him from the things, the negative things that were told to him about me that were not true. And he came to the conclusion, 13, 14 years old, came to me one night and said, "Hey, we need to talk." He said, "All the things that I thought you were aren't true. And all the things I was told you weren't are true. And
mm,
you stood steady and told me, I am a man of integrity. You'll figure it out. Keep watching." And he said, "I did keep watching. And you're right. That is who you are."
yeah,
And that was really powerful because it was so unjustified, all of that. And it was not I'm a justice guy. So it hit me so hard. And I'm like, you know what? Screw it. Just take them then, if that's what you're going to do. And the only thing that brought me back, and maybe the only thing that kept me alive, because I got some dark nights, man, going through that
mm,
by myself, really dark times, was the fact that I did not want him only coming up with the same mindset that his mom was giving to him, which is broken.
mm, mm,
I needed to make sure that he got a healthy mindset, a healthy truth, that he did not operate in fear, that he did not operate in anxiety. It was my responsibility to him, is that what kept me in the game. But man, I almost quit like 100 times. And I feel so bad for these dads who don't get any rights, don't get any justice, and that needs to be fixed. I mean, in Florida now it's assumed 50-50, but when I got divorced it was not. And I gave up a lot of money and a lot of things to get that 50-50 because that's what I wanted. But I had to fight for that. And even though I fought for that, once I got him, I was like, oh crap, now what? But I knew that's what I wanted. And I figured it out and I worked through it. But a lot of dads don't get that. They
mm,
don't get any sharing rights. And I'll say this, man, to dads, that if you have a baby out of wedlock, understand that you may never get to see that child again if things go sideways. So you need to get married up or not be having kids out of wedlock, because you are not just damaging yourself, you're damaging that child. And generationally, you're creating a generation of broken children, uh, by being a boy instead of a man and getting a girl pregnant when you're not married to her. And guys are like, oh, simp. They call me all kinds of names for that. Listen, you're not a man if you're out sleeping with a bunch of women and not marrying them. That's not a man. That's a boy. That's a boy that never learned how to be a man.
that's
Because
right.
men have honor and integrity and character. Boys don't. They just do what they feel and they go by their emotions. So I don't care what anybody says. I'll speak against that over and over and over, because that is part of what's creating the problem. The courts need to get better. But most of these situations are not a married couple that were married for 20 years and have kids.
Right.
It is something different.
Right.
And we're allowing that to happen. These guys are allowing that to happen themselves. They can't hear that at the time because they're just going to throw punches. I got it. I know they're pissed. I was there too.
Yeah.
But in the end, that's the truth. And no matter what we're doing, we need to be thinking like men if we want to change this world and make it a better place. Because we need men. We don't need boys. We don't need emasculated men. We need men.
Yeah. Well, Michael, maybe another, maybe this becomes a place of where, maybe those men that are listening, um, that are in the fight
Yeah.
still, that, I mean, obviously we want to always come from this idea that the best thing that you can do ever or one of the best things you can ever do for your kids, um, is love their mom.
Yeah.
But we know life happens and divorce happens. So okay, so here we are. What do we do? What are we going to do about it? And so maybe maybe part of this sometimes can be a support for those men that are listening that are still in this fight, that are trying to get 50-50, or, are trying to,
Yeah.
to be the dad when they're not living in under one roof, that a support system, in that endeavor, and so we can have some conversations organically that, are centered around that. And
I
maybe
agree.
even maybe we, and I love your story, but maybe we even, have others that have experienced some of the same,
Oh,
some,
I've got a great friend who's a divorce mediator, family divorce mediator, and he is really has a great understanding of this. And he would come on, I'm sure, if he
yeah,
could make the time.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, I think that's huge, Jeff. I think we should help them. And I don't. I think the main thing is, I would say right out of the gate, if you're hearing this and you're in that situation, don't give up. Don't give
yes,
up. And
no,
if you have limited access to your kids, plan the time that you're with them and make it intentional. Don't just take them to, don't be a Disneyland dad, and don't be on your phone, and don't be busy, and don't have a girl involved. Like, take that time and be intentional about making the most of it. And if you can't see them, but you can get to them, talk to them, start writing your kids letters, because you have time to think. You're not in the moment. You're not in the heat of the moment. You can think clearly, and you can create instructions for them. And I have a friend, his name's David Gregory. Actually, I introduced you to him. He's an author, Christian author, and he wrote a book for kids, but it was a letter to his son that was turning 16. And it was so powerful that he turned it, his son said, "You should make this into a book, Dad." And it was about his son, this is what your relationship with God looks like, or can look like. And it was powerful. And so
mhm,
I think that as men, we need to, there's a lot of men that are incarcerated that can't get their kids.
that's right.
And
Yeah,
they're giving up while they're in the inside, rather than focusing on how can they mentor their kid from where they are,
that's right.
whatever access you have.
What do you, how do I, and I think what you said was really valuable. We can't always control the circumstances,
Right.
but we can maximize what it is. And so if we have an hour, then what are you going to do with that 60 minutes? If you have 2 days, what are you going to do with
Yep.
with those 2 days to reinsert yourself
That's right.
as to the point that that your kids want to be with you,
Right.
that they want to that they want to be with their dad. So that's not the issue. You remove that issue. The issue between the two adults is one thing, but if the kid wants to be with dad, then that's gonna, to me, that kind of helps the argument,
It does.
and because let's face it, nobody wants to drag a kid to their dad's house, and
Right.
all that does is add more drama to the situation, especially as they get older and they can make decisions for themselves.
Right.
That's, and
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
we were talking about kind of rewind that preparation. Do I am I the father that I need to be. And, I wrote a book called Dad Prep, and I think I shared with you,
Yeah.
you have
Great
the
book.
book. And the
Yeah, it's
question,
fantastic.
one of the questions in the intro, you were, because, oh, I know what spurred that thought was when you told your son, I'm going to be in your life the rest of my life, but I won't be there for the rest of your life. Well, okay, so here's the questions. When I leave this earth, have I done everything as a dad in my power to equip my children for when I'm gone?
That's
So,
right.
have I set that spiritual example? Is their faith, do they have a strong foundation that that they're going to be okay? Are they going
Yeah.
to basically, have I done everything? Excuse me. Have I done everything that I can do? And are they going to be okay? That's what we want to know.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, but simple, and and I've got to have honestly, I need to have a conversation with my 35-year-old about, to remind him that his dad is not perfect,
Yeah.
that I have made a lot of mistakes in my life.
Yep.
And I think sometimes we have to, you were talking about transparency and vulnerability. And I think as parents, as men, that's really hard to be.
Yeah, it is.
But, um, but I think, I don't know if there's, honestly, Michael, I don't know if there's a greater example, model that we could share with our kids than being transparent and vulnerable.
It's just teaching
Especially,
them bravery is what it is.
yeah, especially as a man.
Yeah. That's
A
what I
man,
mean.
yeah, because um, either we're going to raise another generation of men that don't talk to each other, or we're going to show them how it's really supposed to be.
Yeah,
Right now, or we're just going to allow our son, to perpetuate what we didn't share with
that's
them.
right.
You
That's
know,
right.
and but I think they need to know that, because I think also at some point, not that my son puts me on any pedestal by no means, but I think also they need to know that that, that along the way you made lots of mistakes too, and that when you make a mistake, it's inevitable. But
Yeah,
what do you do at that point? You know, that you are still worthy, that you are
that's right.
worthy, that you are forgiven,
Yep.
that you have a heavenly Father that loves you
Yeah.
unconditionally.
Amen.
And so that I want you to hold me accountable for that conversation with
Yeah.
with my son.
Yeah. Absolutely. I got you on that. Yeah. And that's where the, you know, helping men comes out, right? Like being able to bounce those things off one another and come up with ideas because I can't. I think every father, every man, let me rephrase that. Every man at some level, I don't care who they are, they have a sense of honor. Whether it's skewed, whether it's twisted, whether it's hidden, whether it's buried, it doesn't matter. Men are born with somewhat of a sense of honor, right? It's just kind of how we are, right? It's why we'll get in a fight at the drop of a hat if somebody talks about our mother. It's just the way we're wired. And I encourage men to dig that up if you've buried it, because you need that sense of honor to get through to this place. But y your understanding of what a man is can easily be skewed if you didn't have one to model it for you. And that's where you need other men. That's where you have to find out. That's where you have to lean into older guys in the church or in your job that you think are great dads and go, "Hey man, can I take you to lunch? Because I've got some questions." Most of those guys are happy to help, especially the older we get, we start to realize, man, there's a lot of guys that need our help. There's a lot of kids that need our help. I hope I did great with mine, but man, look at all these other ones that got left behind. What do I do about that? And some people can walk right past it, but I think most men see it clearly,
Yeah.
whether
Yeah.
they do anything about it or not. And I want to encourage them to be a part of a movement that becomes fatherly, right? We've all seen that kid that needs a whack on the butt. We all have as men. We see it, we say it. That kid needs a spanking. Yeah, they do. But and some believe in that and some don't, and that's okay. The Bible's pretty clear about how you handle that. And that's what I follow. But they need authority and they need direction. I don't know if I shared this story with you. It's pretty cool. There's not a resort, but I can't remember what it's called, but anyway, it's a place in Africa where they keep all these animals. And I forget what is that called, where they have all the animals, but
like a
it's wild.
refuge or
Yeah,
like
there's something else.
a conservative.
Yeah, we're on the
Yeah,
same page. We're on the same
yeah,
page. So
yeah.
anyway, they had all these animals and they developed a new one. They kind of started outgrowing the area and they had to do a new area. So they brought almost brought them over in twos or fours. They brought over the rhinos, they brought over the giraffes, they brought over the lions. They did all that and then they brought over the elephants. Well, for the elephants, the straps were not strong enough to carry an adult, so they brought over some juvenile elephants. They were two males, two females. Actually, I think it was four and four. And after about 3 months, the male juvenile elephants started killing the white rhinoceroses. In fact, they were hunting them and killing them.
Mm,
And they were so confused. They're like, this is not something we've ever seen. This is not typical behavior. We don't understand it. And so they went to the curator of the first preserve and they said, do you know anything that's going on? He was an older guy and he went and checked it out and he goes, yep, I know. So he created bigger straps, heavier straps, so that they could transport two male bull elephants over. And they transported them over, and the male bull elephants trained, they corrected and trained the juvenile male bull elephants. And they taught them how to be elephants. And then all that behavior stopped. They were able to take the males back to their original space, and it never happened again. But that is just a
yeah.
very clear depiction of how important it is to be taught how to be a man and a father from another man and a father. That's
Hmm.
a positive role model. And we need it. We require this is not something that you can just get through or power through, that men can just figure it out. You can't. You
Yeah.
can't. Now, you can learn it from the Word of God. You can. If you study that and look at the reciprocal relationship between God and the Father and Jesus, I learned a lot there. But it was men that were walking it out that really gave me the encouragement and the power to do it myself.
Mm,
And that we need it. You've got to have it. And I don't think, I think a lot of men are, lone wolves and I can do it myself and da da da. Well, not with this, man. I disagree with this
mm,
particular thing when it comes to raising kids and your daughters. We're talking a lot about sons, but your daughters are just as important. If you do not teach them the kind of man that they're looking for, then they're
mm.
going to take a hamburger when they could have had a filet mignon, and
Oh,
because you didn't teach them their value.
yeah. Well, the most powerful relationship is of the four combinations. Father daughter, father son. Mother daughter, mother son is father daughter.
Absolutely.
That's what the research says. And the number
Yeah.
one is
Yeah.
father, daughter, then father, son, and
Yep.
then not to diminish the role of the mom, the mother, because it
Not at
takes,
all.
but it's just, that it is what it is.
Yeah. It was designed to have both parents. That's the original
Right.
design. We're just
Exactly.
not we're
Yeah,
just not in that design these days
right.
as often as we should be.
That's right.
But yeah, you're right. And we talked about my friend Greg Gerber, who has a podcast called Forward from 50, and he was a dad of three daughters, and he called himself a dodo. He was on my podcast one time, and he called himself a dodo, and he said, "I'm a dad of daughters only." But he was dating them. I remember telling you this story, I think. He took each one of them out. I guess it was every couple weeks. Each one got their own separate date. What he did not know, and he didn't find out till they were in their 30s, was that when he brought the one home that went on the date, the other two were waiting. She ran in and they're like, "Tell us all about it. Everything, all the
Yeah.
details." You'd think she went out with some boy with a leather jacket and a Camaro. She was
Right.
out with her dad.
Yeah.
And they cherished that. And the men that they married reflected that. because they
Mhm.
married really good men, solid men that treated them really well, that are great fathers. We can teach them or we don't have to. And if we don't do it,
Yeah.
we can't expect them to thrive. We can't expect
Yeah.
them to have a really healthy marriage
Yeah.
because we didn't teach
Yeah.
them how.
Yeah. Well, Michael, man, we've covered a lot of territory for our initial
Yeah,
our initial launch.
I know. There's so much more to. I think we could go all day, which is why this is going to be fun.
It is. It
Yeah,
is. So how do we close this one up? What do you think?
I think in prayer always, but I think let's pick a subject matter for next time and let's dive into one of the things that we've talked about, kind of at great length, and really share some of the things that we've learned that might be helpful. What do you think of that?
I like it.
Do you have a subject matter in mind that you'd like to maybe touch on?
I'm thinking just the idea this idea that um that what how is it what are the different ways that we influence or can influence our children by our and you've said the word over and over this evening, the intentionality.
Yeah.
So what does being intentional look like, and why does that matter?
Yeah. I think that's good. Yeah. How you do anything is how you do everything. So I think that's huge.
Yeah.
That's good.
So,
Yeah. Let's let that be it. And uh, hopefully next time we can hear about how your conversation with your son went, your 35-year-old. Excited to hear about that. And I hope you're able to have that before we come together. And if you would you close us out in prayer?
absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. Dear Heavenly Father, I give thanks for this brand new day. I give thanks that you woke us up this morning, that you gave us another day, that we got today to make a difference in the lives of those that you put in our path. And Lord, I just ask that as we continue to, uh, consider what it is that you would have us do through this podcast, that those that might hear, um, might that are listeners that are, possibly men that are struggling with what it means to be that dad, to be that intentional dad, that maybe they hear, Lord, they hear your voice, they hear you, uh, um, in spite of us. Sometimes we have passionate, we have, we're excited about what we're talking about, Lord. But and most of all, I pray that they see and hear your voice through
Mhm.
our conversation and our love for you. Um, and Lord, I just again pray for those men across this country and across this world that want to be that better dad, and then ignite in the heart of those that that are on the sideline to get off the bench, to get in the game. That this is game day. That God, every day God gives us is game day. That they suit
Yeah.
up for their
Mhm.
children. And Lord, again, as we leave this place today, we ask that we continue to represent you in everything we say and do. And Lord, that we give you the glory. Lord, we
Amen.
love you, and we certainly need you.
Yeah.
In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. So good, brother. Thank you, man.
You bet.
Blessings till we meet again, my friend.
Blessings, my brother.